STMK Radio 100. STMK Radio 100. You've been listening to Stop the Madness. Keep it 100 on STMK Radio 100.
Hey, good evening, Podcast Nation. I'm your host, Shawn L, here in Studio 51. And tonight we are back with our main guest. We got Economic Mob in the house from Oklahoma, and we got a special treat for y'all. The main man himself, Prince Sanders from the ATL, and we got another guy in the studio named The Truth. You want to know what's going on with Trump? He's going to tell you about it. Welcome right there, Prince. Welcome
Yes,
back with
sir.
us. And how's it going down there in the ATL?
Everything's good. Praise the Lord. It's cool, but it's the last Saturday of 2018, and my thoughts go out to the all the people paid $1,000 this weekend to see Trump at Mar-a-Lago. They might not get it. All the yeah.
Well, we were talking about this earlier, and I want to go back into that because I seen them. They was flashing me on that. We was talking about the shutdown and what's going on. So I want to ask you this question because last time you was on the show, we talked about 1968 and the parallels of 2018 and the Trump and Nixon administration. What is
Yes.
the state of politics for you right now? How do you see it?
Well, good question. How I see it right now, we're in perilous times right now. We have way past what 1968 was, and at 2018, the end of 2018, we are in a very dangerous place right now. Nothing in 1968, despite all his traumas, bears a likeness to Donald Trump. His administration, his high-profile neighbors, their rampant and shameless veracity, his myriad of bigotries, explicit incitement to violence against journalists, racial minorities, political foes, technological advances, market forces have allowed these toxins to spill properly into the right-wing pseudo-journalism and the sewers of social media. The tremors of America in 1968, Shawn L., destabilizing as they were, rumble from below. The full-scale earthquake of 2018 has been activated from above, from the highest office in the land.
Well, right there, economic mob. I want to get you in this. Where do you see the state of our politicians and politics in the United States?
I actually think we're in a wonderful place, but I can understand what the professor had just stated. But when President Obama got elected, a lot of people were overjoyed. They looked at the symbolism of having a melanated president, an African American, or a first black president in office. And I think that once he completed his terms and you actually took a measurement of the progress and what he actually did to bring about change, social justice, and equality, one can actually look at Donald Trump in a similar manner and say, it's Donald Trump sitting in the White House inspirational to individuals. Is he gonna inspire individuals to actually be more assertive or have more like community cohesiveness, or are they gonna expect a handout or some aspect of pity coming from the government rather than empower themselves? So I think him being in office is just as great of significance as President Obama being in office if you're gonna be proactive and if you're gonna move.
But okay, but let me ask you this question. In
Hmm.
truth, I'm gonna send it to you in a minute. But I want to ask you this question on follow up. If Trump is pushing hate, how is it capable of being active and together? Yeah, to you.
Well, what we look at as Trump pushing his hate is not as though it hasn't existed since America began. And if you look at the Democrats or if you look at the Republicans, sometimes the way that we look at hate, I much rather an individual actually vocalize it or verbalize it than have systems in place to sort of uh, uh, like shadow governments who actually tell you one thing and they mean the exact same thing as him. So I think to have a president in office who actually can't control his mouth, he might not basically have like the political adequacy that we might possess. It's better than having somebody in there like Obama who actually would bite his tongue and go mute when we would actually try to get him to just the real issues he would actually say, I'm a president for the people, where Donald Trump is pretty much telling you, I'm a president for the white people.
For 30%. So, Truth, you heard the question. Go ahead and weigh in on that for us.
Well, I understand how everybody feels about Donald Trump, and that's something that I don't totally agree with. I believe Donald Trump brings something new to politics, and that is the truth. For so many years, we in our societies have decided that it was the best idea for us to stick our heads in a hole and not be aware of what's happening around us like ostriches. But Donald Trump comes out and tell the world just how he feels. He don't tell us what we want to hear. He tell us what is the truth. And that is painful for a lot of us.
But let me ask you this question here, because I want you to weigh in too, Prince, right here.
Yes.
When it comes to the truth, Donald Trump is the most lying individual that there is. So, I mean, how you know when he's telling you the truth? By his continuous lies about situations that really he shouldn't be lying or telling you faith or his own. Like, uh, classic example, his inauguration.
Well,
Yeah, Shawn L. When I think about the STMK, this is my third on session with you guys, and I'm just so thankful. It listen to your show now and being a part of it. Just I'm new. I reminded of in next week be January the 4th. Reminds me of an op-ed piece for our listeners out there, real short, from New York Times on January the 4th, 2017. There was a full-page advertisement in the New York Times that declared that the Trump presidency a fascist regime and called on millions to stand in opposition to rise up in a resistance movement that would create a political crisis in the nation. The group's webpage announced a month-long action in conjunction with Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday to shut down Washington, D.C. and prevent Donald Trump from taking office. I thought I was reading an old SDS weatherman call for days of rage in Chicago in 1969. When revolution was supposed to be imminent, it didn't happen. And then I saw the ad was signed by some of the same 60s radicals. A friend joked if they really wanted to shut down Washington this time, they would join the Republican Party. Donald Trump presidency is scary, but fascism has not arrived in the United States, at least not yet. I would join the January 21st Women's March on Washington, D.C. to protest the Trump agenda, but I don't think the solution at this point is to take to the streets in rebellion.
Well,
I say to the brothers, let me finish. I say to the brothers, there's no way that all these women that we saw a year ago next week can say that anything about this Trump administration is good for anybody in this country.
well, I
Or the
want
world.
I want to go right here because I want to get Truth back into the thing
Sure.
because he was going to respond to that. Truth, go ahead and say
Please.
respond to what you just heard.
well, I don't see Donald Trump as a total divisive figure in America. I see Donald Trump as an enlightening figure in America. We knew that all of these things, such as racism and white supremacists, was out there. We knew it was there all the time, but it was hidden. It was hidden by our Democratic uh, 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 part of government. It was hidden by the Republicans. It was hidden by ourselves. We knew this was there. As long as it wasn't said, it was fine. But finally, we get someone in office who says what he thinks, says what he believes, brings out the worst in America, and that's what we need. We need to bring it out of the darkness into the light so that we can confront it.
Well,
Donald Trump was the perfect man for the job.
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Prince.
True. Character is destiny. You got men who are built for their time. Men like Winston Churchill. Men like Franklin D. Roosevelt. These men were built for their time. This Donald Trump he has no moral leadership or courage whatsoever. And there's nothing to say that could even make the remote person think that Donald Trump has anybody in mind but Donald Trump. And lately, he's forgetting about Donald Trump. So I really got to push back on it. But I've listened to your voice, brother.
Well, let me ask this question to everybody right here because everybody had a chance to weigh in on politics of the way they see it right now. We are in a shutdown right now. And Donald Trump is threatening to close the southern border if he doesn't get what he wants. And now we're talking about the economy that is overbaked. We're talking about the healthcare market that is failing. all the safeguards that was put in place by Dodge Frank and stuff is gone off of the Dow and the market. And right now, if you close down the southern border, we're talking about $1 million a day in deficit and affecting hundreds of thousands of workers in the United States alone, just alone.
In commerce. That's
Okay,
right,
and
commerce.
commerce alone. So I'm gonna ask this question. Now that we're in a shutdown, how do anybody see the way out of it? And go ahead, Prince, since you're in Atlanta, I'm gonna give you the first shot at that.
Well, I thank God that the Democrats will take control of the Congress on January 3rd, and all indications seem that Pelosi's going to just take a few minutes, 12 minutes, 6 minutes, and write up something and send it to the senators. And it's up to Mitch McConnell to get it through the Senate and put it on Trump's desk. But the government will open up past January 3rd. It will open up.
And economic mob, this is right there on your issue of us spending our dollars not properly appropriating it. Where you see this going?
It's kind of ironic, but when you mention that, that's the first thing I actually thought about when you said how much it's costing or what the deficit would be. And I'm more strategic when it comes to that. You know me, I'm like a Moore, so while I realize that we do need a public government, I try to stay in the private sector. And responding from a private position, I think it's an opportunity where we can at least address some issues to the point where if we're gonna vote for these politicians, okay, what's the criteria we have in establishing who we're gonna vote for, deciding on a candidate? Um, After we do vote, say we don't get the candidate elected that we want to be elected, do we have any type of think tanks that later get together and try to brainstorm or set up some type of pre-election, a post-election type evaluation so that you can begin to gather members, strengthen up the numbers to the point where you can be assured, at least on a smaller level, a local level, that your candidate gets elected. So I think um, this is good.
Well, you have to look at this also, truth.
I think it's good.
When you look at this, our kids do not understand their civic liability and their civic duty to
Correct.
vote
That's right.
and to do what they need to do. So, in other words, we may have to change our programs. Like I tell the activists, and I got a lot of them mad at me, the
I'm sure
NAACP
they are.
and them, is that we have to change the way our kids think. And the way to change the way our kids think, truth, and I want you to weigh in on this, is that maybe we have to go to the monetary side of things instead of the educational side of things to let them know that this is what your benefit is for getting involved in that. Truth, what you think about that?
Well, I really believe that most of the young people today are starting to realize that economic plays a big part in their lives. They also realize that all of the administrations that came before Donald Trump did just as little. Donald Trump is actually giving them an opportunity to see what the possibility is if you don't become a third minority in the country, which we have become. We have to understand that this is not about hate, wanting some defense on the border to help maintain order of those who come into our country. But as more people flood into this nation, blacks are becoming farther and farther behind in economics, farther and farther behind in political power.
But see, wait a minute, I might have to push back on you right there, truth. Now go
Yeah, I
ahead.
would.
Wait a minute right there, Prince, because I want to say this the truth. Because
Yeah.
you can put all the walls on the border that you want down in southern the United States. That's not going to solve the immigration problem because our problem with immigration is more people coming in with visas and overstaying their visa. And
And most of them come from Canada.
right, and they're coming from Canada. Not only that, the jobs that they're coming in from are Fortune 5 companies that are marketing foreigners to come in and do those jobs instead of
Yes.
training Americans. So when you look at the border, okay, and I want to say this, this goes back to something that I've been listening to all three of y'all weigh into this, okay? Donald Trump did two things that we as black men must stand up and go against, whether we like any of his policies. He started to do the birther uh,
movement.
which means
Hmm.
that he started the racist birther movement to bring back the white knights and racism back to the level that is in now. And they began to erase the first black president. And that was by design. That wasn't by accident now, okay? Anything that Obama did, they're erasing right now, and he goes, but I don't care about Obama because as Economic Mob said, Obama wasn't what we thought he should have been. Okay, but what I'm looking at is the gains that was gained, the Voting Rights Act, the affirmative action right, the rights where black men can't even stand in lobbies of hotels on cell phones. Okay, and unarmed black men's being killed by white police officers and nobody's being held accountable. So when you start looking at what is being taken away, that's where we have to be alarmed at. And when we come back around to that movement, you have to look at this. The neo Nazis and the skinheads are only coming out now because they have a voice. And that
Yes.
voice is the mainstream voice. So when we look at this right here, as Fannie Lewis, Lonnie Burton, and all them put the programs in place for black advancement, we're not advancing. And I understand what Truth said about what Donald Trump is showing you that this is a market, it's a society, and it's a haves and have nots. Okay. So if you don't get on the train and go, but the problem is half of our brothers and sisters can't even walk into the station. They're not equipped. So this is where we have the problem at, Truth. So this is what I want to ask you, because I know that you're going to come back here. But this is what I want to ask you. Being a third minority may not be bad for black people because we were never a part of America idea in the first place.
Well, that's true. But if you take a look at what's going on right now, what Donald Trump is trying to tell black America is that you can be in the position that you were in better now, because now they have a greater enemy. And don't get me wrong, the Hispanics are not my enemies, because America was built by Spanish, blacks, whites, and all nations. But the people coming in from those Latin American countries, they are in some form a deterrent to my children
But
trying to
how?
move
But
ahead.
let me ask you this.
But
Wait a minute, wait a minute, Prince. Let me ask you this
yes, sir.
question right here, Truth. How? Because the jobs that they're doing, no American want.
Well, as you've seen, their jobs are advancing. There are jobs in carpentry, jobs in roofing. These were jobs and stuff that were many times traditionally carried on by black people. They're,
That's correct. But when we dropped the trades from schools, who fault is that? Our schools used to have
That's correct.
had a sitting where if you wasn't academically inclined, they taught you a trade. Okay, auto body shop,
Max 8.
Wood,
wood shop,
metal
bricklaying.
shop.
Now
Hmm.
we don't want the jobs in the hotels. You tell me one black right now there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of crops rotting in the fields right now out east. I mean out west and in Texas. Okay. Down in Alabama, when they started this, all the Mexicans and them started leaving. Nobody went down there and took those jobs to bring back those tomatoes. Nobody's down there getting those jobs to do cotton. They are offering $17 an hour, okay, pay, because guess what? That's what they had to pay American workers to go out there. Nobody's doing those jobs. Those crops are rotting in the field. So when you say that the Latinos and the Guatemalas are taking your kids' jobs, are they really taking your kids' jobs, or is it that that's what you've been fed to believe so they can bring them in illegally anyway to do the job to keep your kids out of the jobs?
well, I look at it like this. I look at it like this. If they stay on the farm, then we would be fine. But just like most people, no one wants to stay on the farm. Eventually, you're coming to the cities, and there are no tomatoes, no onions, no pickles, anything to be picked here in the cities. It's only our
Right,
jobs.
but you have to look at this. Then that's your employer because e-check, okay, they don't have no social security numbers. Okay. So if the employer hires, like Donald Trump hires illegal immigrants, they're robbing the system themselves. See, because if you want to stop the immigration problem, I can tell you right now how to stop the immigration problem. And then, Prince, I'm going to let you jump in here. If they start prosecuting employers for hiring immigrants, we wouldn't have an immigration problem, okay? Because they only come over here because the jobs are here. And they're sending their money back home. But you have to look at this, and I'm going to quote this right here from the findings of the AG from a state of Utah and Nevada, which is red states. Employers are paying Mexicans $6 and $5 an hour, okay, no medical, and have them living in standards below what we have dog kennels rated to, okay? And they do that because guess what? You cannot go complain because you're illegally here. Go ahead and step in on that, Prince.
Well, I listened to I think it was the brother Truth, just
Right.
speaking the prop, economic mom. Anyway, but we talk about the folks, the immigrants. We call them, various nations: Guatemala, Nicaragua, San Salvador, El Salvador, Brazil, Mexico. But one thing you don't hear a lot of, whether you hear in the print media, in the TV or however you get your source of information. Keep in mind that one thing: they are human beings, just like your children, my sisters, Butchie's family, Sean's family, and your family, and other family members out there. They're human beings, and that right there alone should make us all want to take a step up to help them, because this is a nation of immigrants, and we got to stop. We got to stop treating them like they're, and as they say, invasion and infestation. Because they're not. They're human beings. And now, over the last month, we've had 2 children die, and we always talked about it's always about the children, whether they're from Guatemala, Nicaragua, or San Salvador. They're still children.
Let me go right here and switch the shift for everything, because Truth said something that's going to bring us right into our next segment right here. Truth, tell me, how do you see the black community today, right now? What do you see is going on with them, and how do you see them progressing forward?
Well, when I think about the black community today, I'm kind of disappointed because I think about blacks 20 years out of slavery. They had their own businesses, their own stores, they had their own doctors. The blacks out of slavery, 20 years out of slavery, they were involved in politics. They kept the dollar within their community. Maybe it would circulate maybe 16 times within the community before it left out. But then all the opportunities that were given to us once we went through segregation, once we decided that we wanted to be involved in the greater community, we wanted to integrate. It was probably the worst thing that ever happened to us.
But when you go back into that, and that's example that we just going over the economic mob to bring him back in, and I just asked him the question about that also earlier, is our dollar, okay? Why are we spending our dollar with people who does not respect us? I go back to the activists. If you come into the activism of anything that's happening, and you go back to 1968, 67, prior to the riots, the most important person in the black community was the Jewish community, okay? And I tell everybody to go back into the Jewish community and look how the Jewish community is run today. It's still run today as it was post-German and in Israel right now. They keep their dollars in there. They educate their kids the proper way so they can know what to do. They not only that, they put money into each person's house in the community so everybody can live at the same standard. If we all living at the same standard, then there's no need for me to steal your piece of bread. So, Prince, come on, how do you see the black community?
Well, I was listening to Brother True. Can I answer how long you been around? Were you right here in '68? I'm not sure. Were you back in '68?
Well, I was a young man in '68, very young man. But
can you tell me how young?
I was actually 8 years old in '68.
Oh, okay then. All right.
He was he's half your age. We already know you were 16 years old. So go ahead.
Okay, all right. But I'm not. She's well read. I can tell he's well read. But if you're familiar with Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here?
I've heard it.
Are you familiar? Okay, all right. And so your question, and I mean, Richard's question is open here in regards to, I said, of Black America. In August 7th speech, he had in '67 speech at the 11th annual Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. In Atlanta, Dr. King asked his audience, which included much of the leadership of the African American civil rights movement here, and so where do we go from here? And I'll read you a couple of excerpts from the book, and I would like to share them with our listeners audience today. He writes, "It must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar massive effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe they have so little to learn." I say that because we look in '68, as Butch Shawn says about the activists, and how we can bridge the gap from 1960 to 2018. We got to go back to that, but we take those mechanism that was in place as far as gathering people together and not in secrecy, gathering out like movements we got today. We got to get out and educate all our sisters and brothers, not just a few in certain demographics of the country. A lot of folks are being left behind, just like it was in '68, 50 years later, and a lot of folks are still being left behind. We got to gather up everybody. That's the only way we're going to do it. Everybody's got to be involved.
Well,
And it's got no more. I'm sorry.
you have to go back. I want to jump in here for a minute because
Sure.
you have to go back to Reconstruction, okay?
Yeah.
And everybody has to understand this is that the education of the African slave, uh, when Reconstruction came up and we were free people, okay? So I want to say this free people because everybody wasn't slaves back in those days. You forget that we had educated
Right.
black men with money that came over here from England. Okay, so when the slaves were free, that's where the problem started at because they had to re-educate the African slave. And to
Yes, sir.
re-educate the African slave, they had to install the slave mentality still on your mind. Okay, so that's where we have to go back into that area of the '60s, and I go to the '60s because that's when black people woke up and said, "Hey,
Oh, yeah.
we're going to do this, and we're going to do this as one." See, before you had Oklahoma, where my man from, where they burned the whole town down. Oklahoma was a black town that,
Black Wall Street.
okay, Black Wall Street. All the money was there, and they took care of everybody. But in the '60s, everybody stood up as one. The Black Panthers came in
Correct.
and stood up and took care of the community and fed the poor people and also protect the people. Okay, and this is where truth. I have to agree with truth on some things. Is that I feel embarrassed for our people also because we are living in prison. Our elderly people cannot come outside. They're living behind bars and chains. They can't walk the street. They can't go to the store.
Alarm
Uh,
systems.
they got alarm systems. Our kids can't go out to the park. They can't even enjoy anything. And we're allowing our communities to turn into war zones, and we're not talking about it. East Cleveland is the classic example. Everybody's from Cleveland. East Cleveland was one of the richest towns in America. That was Rockefeller's estate, the richest man in America's estate. Okay. Now it's the poorest town in America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all because it's being ran by blacks who steady fighting amongst themselves, who the activists are steady tearing down the structure instead of trying to come together and build a structure and put a brick down. Everybody want to pick a brick up and throw it. And then they want to blame 90% of the people who live in there in property that has not been properly trained. Okay, and this is where I go back to all of us being left behind with economic mob and his system of the greenbacks, because as everybody related to, blacks have the biggest dollar power right now in America. And if we would just take that dollar and start putting it into our own communities instead of taking it out. And that brings me to this. If we start putting it into our own communities, we can build our own communities. Our own communities can survive, and we won't have to worry about people coming in and raping our communities and taking our resources from. So, Troop, I want to ask you this because I want to go back to something Fannie Lewis has said with Cleveland. Everybody know Fannie Lewis. That's why we got Prince with us because he's from Cleveland. Fannie Lewis,
7404
right,
7404 Star Avenue.
right. Uh,
Definitely.
when you look at this with Cleveland
I know
Clinic,
address.
right? Cleveland Clinic came in the '70s and wanted to take over all of the Superior, St. Clair,
Yes.
uh, Euclid, Carnegie, Cedar area, and Fannie Lewis made them put money into that area and build that area back
Yes, you
up
need.
for the black people. And when you look at East Cleveland, we're looking at the worst regentrification of people that has ever happened in America because they have walked away from a major part of a city and just letting it go. And that's where we got to put that change in. So, economic mile, you talk about bringing up people into that section of economically living to your means and helping yourself. So, how are we going to bring them to that point to save East Cleveland, or can we save it?
You know what? I kind of hate to say it, but let's just look at America, the history of immigrants who came into America, was Irish, Italian, Sicilian. These individuals came in and they had similar challenges as far as like them being assigned minuscule type jobs and bullshit like type
Correct.
jobs, and they were discriminated against until they basically were enculturated into being white people. They lost their ethnicity to be white people. Now, what happened in their communities that actually caused their communities to have a sense of pride, a sense of unity, a sense of heritage and culture?
But
Mafia.
right, but
They
you
had a
they had the
they
mafia to
had a
bring it in.
group of individuals who was inside of that community who told you these are the rules, and if you break the rules, we're not going to call the police. We're going to handle it.
There you go.
And we don't want to have this conversation, but it's one that's going to actually be relevant in order to actually take a true assessment of things. The police didn't come into the Italians or the Irish communities. They had mobs to handle that. They enforced the streets, and they actually end up taking on those positions of law enforcement officers. We're in a similar situation. You got a black mayor, you got a black police chief, you got black councilmen. Why is our communities actually fading? Why all this crime is coming into place? Obviously, the system in place does not work for us. I would suggest getting together some individuals who are concerned about the community from an economic or political or educational level. And once you get your think tank together, you only need to build up or amass a certain group of men. And once you got that number, we have to be honest and say, is that my kid out there selling dope or tearing up the neighborhood or pissing on the sidewalk, and go out there and get them? Now, if you don't go get your kid, guess what happens? Economic mob goes out there and chastise your kid,
And take care of the problem.
but it's some shadow ghost type stuff where ain't no other kids gonna be out there doing that anymore. It's done.
Well, I agree
It's
with
it's,
that.
it's settled.
You spot on. You spot on. But see, when you talk about think tanks, I tell you something. You better be familiar with the United States Civil Disturbance Plan of 55 too. Okay, in HR 645 in regards to the 111 Congress put up plans in regards to going back to the 60s about the COINTEL. They got organizations in place to put us down. The feds have went out. They went out and trained the clergy to quell dissent doing martial law
King Alfred
and
plan.
keep it. Huh?
King Alfred plan. I know what you're
Alpha
talking
plan.
about.
That's
Yeah.
what Shawn, no, I mentioned already. But I'm saying, if these things that be done, they're gonna be done in secret. How they go these think tanks? We've got if you getting together is great, but then again, you have to have a chapter in every city, in every hamlet, every village, everywhere. We got to unite. I can understand why they say we the people. They mean exactly what's it. We the people. That's what's going to put a stop to what's going on right now. If we want this country to go anywhere, and our children and our children's children have anything, the time is now because we are truly at an inflection point now. And all the rhetoric and some of the talking stuff got to go. It's all about action. It's about moving forward and taking everybody along. Don't leave nobody behind.
I agree. My professor, brother, did you know that one of the main conversations we engage in is like reparations? We always try to identify as being a poster child of slavery when we had people, our people who actually had white slaves, black slaves. It was our people who actually caused a mandate for the laws that would decide whether an individual would be considered a free man or a slave. Now, right now in Ghana, right, in Ghana, Africa, They have basically set things in place to invite us economically, potentially for any play they might have had in slavery, where you can go over there and you can invest in setting up some infrastructure. And as long as you basically are coming with a certain amount of money or a blueprint or idea, they'll back your play or find you funding. You can go over there and you
Yeah.
can get those citizenship. See, we're over here expecting something from them. And in all actuality, let me be perfectly honest with you. America was made for the white man, okay? The United States, okay? Now understand what I'm saying. But America is just an incorporation of a group of individuals that came in and they did certain stuff. At the end of the day, it's something it's something meant for us that's far more greater.
But look at this right here, truth.
Man, you are right. I'm sorry, Sean. I gotta pat him on the back. I wish I could, but he's dead. He's spot on him right there.
Yeah, it's
'Cause when
global.
you hear a lot,
It's
I'm,
far
I'm
more
sorry.
greater
Yeah, because when you hear a lot of
than
stories about
America.
Africa, I'm sorry, when you hear a lot of stories about Africa, and you get to a place like Kenya and other countries like that, what do you think? They think the same way we do. I was happy to find that the Schedule of Rights, and I'm quoting, that I drew up for the Kenyan government was working very well. Who do you think said that, Sean? We talked about it on your second show, your first show.
And you have to look at that, right? You go ahead.
Thurgood Marshall. Sorry, Thurgood Marshall. That's okay.
And but you look at Thurgood Marshall when our black leaders, okay, this is where we come back with leaders. Our black
Yeah.
leaders had visions to set things in place for the future, okay? And Truth, go ahead and jump in there.
Well,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with the professor and economic mob to a certain extent on black people moving ahead and bringing everybody along. And right there is where I kind of part a little bit because in no society has any group of people tried to bring everyone along. Professor, you said leave no one behind. Well, there's a lot of bad elements in our society that we need to leave behind. Now, if we're going to try to work with them, and when they don't want to work with us, it's time to cut them loose. See, there are black people, and then there, excuse my language, are niggas. And the black people is who we need to bring along. Those that consider themselves niggas and that hold us down, the crayfish mentality, we don't need to try to drag that along. It's only going to pull us down. And if you take a look at every society here in America, they left the trash behind and moved ahead.
Or dumped it in America. America was basically nothing but a wasteland where every country dumped the worst.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well,
They dumped
well, you have
the
to
worst shit of their people here.
Right.
So see, most of the stuff you see our people doing, it's like a trading places thing historically. When you see motherfuckers going around with saggy pants and
Right.
speaking fucked up English, they learned that shit
Absolutely.
from the Scott Irish and them other people who were slaves who end up becoming the wardens when they actually rebelled against us.
Right, but you have to go back to this, and I want everybody to sit back for a minute because I'm going to go deep on you right here since I
But
got
good point.
my historian. When
Good
you look
point.
when you look at this and exactly what you said, you have to
He's
go
right.
back to the Bacon Rebellion, back when Nathaniel
Reconstruct.
Bacon
I'm sorry.
started the rebellion, okay, because of exactly what we're saying, because that was a design, and you have to understand there was no race back then. Okay, so we have to understand there was no black and white. There was no slaves. Everybody came as indentured servant. The slaves was from the West Indies. Okay, and they spoke 7 different languages. Okay, so we have to understand that when the rebellion took place, there was things put in place. The king said, "Hey, how are we going to stop this so this can never happen again?" So there were certain things put in place where the poorest white person was told they was better than the richest black person, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and they was put over black people, okay. So when you look at that, that's what we have to come up over. As you
Yes,
said,
sir.
some of our people haven't been properly trained, but that's because we haven't trained them in the beginning.
Put them on the front line, the ones that's untrained.
Right,
Affirmative.
right. So I go back to this to something that the old guy has always told me in the thing is that Malcolm X and some of you go back to Nat Turner, okay, and everybody should know where I'm going when Nat Turner said something when he did his rebellion, okay. Remember Nat Turner walked into the courtyard with all the slaves, and he told them what he wanted to tell them, and he asked them, "Who is with me?" And everybody that was with him stood up and said, "We with you." And he looked around and told them, "Okay, so the first thing we got to do is kill all them." Okay? Because if you're not with us,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to hold us back. So we might as well kill you first before we move on. Okay? Now, and this is something that is hard for our activists to understand, uh, especially like the NAACP. The last show they got mad when I called them out for not ensuring people get due process. Police officers get their due process. And we're going to go into that segment in 1 second. But I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
finish this off with you while we got you on the phone. Is that if we don't stand as one and if we don't move as a package, then we must turn around and take our weakest link and dislodge it off the chain.
Mm.
Okay? And I'm going to say this because I look at the elderly people that are being beat up. They can't go to the store. I'm looking at the younger people. We have that element in society that we keep making excuses for that are killing our kids, taking our resources. And it's not all our people also. Okay, I'm going to go back to this because it goes back to all the city employees coming into the city, getting paid, and taking all their money and everything out to their communities and building their communities up, but taking the resources away from our community. And that's where we need to start looking at instead of marching, as I told one activist, instead of marching to the next protest and to get our picture taken, we need to start getting people registered, and then we need an end game to what that march is going to be about so everybody can say, hey, okay, we did this, instead of saying, oh, we just going to wait for the next march. But go ahead, Prince, since you are in Atlanta and you're getting ready to leave us, I want you to go ahead.
Okay. All right. First of all, the gentleman, economic mob and Brother Truth there, I'll tell you something. I hope I get the opportunity one day to maybe Shawn L down the road, maybe sometime next year we'll all get in the studio together.
Oh, it'd be a pleasure, my brother.
Blacks
Most
must wake up to. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just so excited here. Something Shawn had said earlier, and I think economic mom might have echoed that, or the Brother Truth, in regards to he was talking about Reconstruction. And I know you brothers are familiar with Brother Tanishi Coates' book,
Yeah.
8 Years in Power.
Mm-hmm.
And he says in just an introduction, I'll read a couple of paragraphs here. In 1895, Shawn was read off. In 1895, 2 decades after his state moved from the egalitarian innovations of Reconstruction to the oppressive redemption, South Carolina Congressman Thomas Miller appealed to the state's constitutional convention. We were 8 years in power. We had built schoolhouses, established charitable institutions, built and maintained a penitentiary system, provided for the education of the deaf and dumb. We built the ferries. In short, we had reconstructed the state and placed it upon the road to prosperity. By the 1890s, Reconstruction had been painted as a fundamentally corrupt era of Negro rule. It was said that South Carolina stood under the threat of being Africanized and dragged into barbarism and iniquity. Miller hoped that by highlighting black achievement in governance and marching a credible defense of black morality, he might convince the doubtlessly fair-minded people of South Carolina to preserve the citizenship rights of African Americans. His plea went unheeded. The 1895 Constitution added both literacy tests and property requirements as qualifications for enfranchisement. When those measures proved insufficient to enforcing white supremacy, black citizens were shot, tortured, beaten, and maimed.
Wow.
So everybody's point is tied in. Shawn, you was right on with construction, but I think
Wow.
I don't know if it was true. Said something about 20 years after slavery. So you're talking
Correct.
1895. 20 years after that, we still had a ways to go. But you know,
Well,
I'll say this. I'm sorry, Shawn.
go,
I know I'm going to get out of here.
yeah, go ahead and closing. Go ahead and say what
Okay,
you
I'm
want to say in
gonna close
closing.
it. I try. Because if the first show, section, I like to leave you guys with something. All our listeners. And since this guy, he was 8 years old back in '68, I'm gonna share some what you was said in This was said in 1968, and this is in 1968. I was there. I was 16 when this was said and written. I heard it. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it is perhaps well to ask what kind of nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those of you who are black, considering the evidence, there evidently is that there were white people who are responsible. You can be filled with bitterness, with hatred, and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country in great polarization, black people amongst black people, white people amongst white, filled with hatred towards one another, or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and to replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that has spread across our land with an effort to understand with compassion and love. For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and distrust at the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond or go beyond these difficult times. My favorite poem, my favorite poet was Celsius, and he once wrote, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart until our own despair against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but it's love and wisdom and compassion towards one another and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black. So I ask you tonight to return home to say a prayer for the family of Martin Luther King 50 years ago. Yeah, it's true, but more important, to say a prayer for our own country, which all of us love. A prayer for understanding and that compassion of which I spoke. And I'll close with this. We can do well in this country. We will have difficult times. We have had difficult times in the past, and we will have difficult times in the future. It is not the end of violence. It is not the end of lawlessness. And it's not the end of disorder. But the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all. Human beings that abide in our land, and let's dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many, many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Let us dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and for our people. This was written and stated by Robert Francis Kennedy on the night of April the 4th, 1968, in Indianapolis, Indiana, after he got word that Dr. King had got murdered.
Hey, right there, that's our main man, Prince from the ATL. Prince, hey, thank you for being with us, and we're going to get with you, Prince,
Thank you, brother Prince.
and we will get back, hey, man, and have a happy New Year's.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, I'll
Peace,
see you on
God.
the next. I'll see you on the wheel turn. Okay.
All right.
Take care.
Hey, right there, Economic Mob. That was Prince right there from the ATL. And you know, the brother goes in really deep
Yeah,
on things.
absolutely.
But I want to come back into some the last they flashed me. We got 13 minutes, so I want to come back into this right here. I want to talk about the state of policing in America. Everybody in the chat room talking about this. And Truth, you said some stuff earlier. Uh, what what is going on with American policing?
Well, it should be obvious about what's going on with American policing. We gave up the Ku Klux Klan visibility, and we decided to go into black robes, uniforms, and that's what we're experiencing today. There's a reason for this. We weren't killing each other fast enough, apparently, so somebody decided to intervene. But I say this, we have an ally out there, and this ally and stuff we have not tapped into. Every time I see a young brother killed, I see some of our people marching, no justice, no peace. But then when a young white boy is killed, I see no one marching, not even his parents. For some reason, they've been indoctrinated into the police are so good that even killing my child is a good thing.
Well, I'm gonna go right there because you know I talked about this before about activists. You have to have a end game. You just can't march.
Absolutely.
You have to have a reason. Like Black Lives Matters. You have to have something on there because is it the signal that our activists are sending to people is that it's profitable, one, for killing unarmed black males, two, we are hamstringing our law enforcement officers to where if you listen to our intro, Economic Mob was schooling Deputy Chief Cuevas on taking care of his people and what was going on. So, economic, I'm going to ask you this question: if you damn if you do, and you don't want to get out of the zone car because you don't want nobody, you know, you're not going to get the backing. That's like giving a pass to the criminals to do what they do.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
And when you look at this, I want to look at go back for I said this before. The same people that you calling baby killers, you putting millions and millions of dollars or thousands of dollars into their coffin for overtime, then plus court time. Marching, if you go back to Tamir Rice, everybody got paid, including the police officers. Okay, and nothing was done. And I look at groups that I did. I was on a panel last week, and truth, this is what exactly what you were saying right there. I was on a panel because it comes back to it's not the training because everybody gets good training. And if you look at the training in the 137 shots, everybody followed the training that they received on the range. Even when they started shooting for the first time through squad car windows, you seen the
Absolutely.
squad car window shot out. Okay, so you know they're following the training. It goes back to the individual that is training that officer in the car. Okay, that's the individual that you have to target for your equal rights.
Field training
To
officer.
your field training officers. But I go back to go back to a thing, economic mob, where I think that the people who want to be supervisors, the sergeants, the lieutenants, the captain, the commanders, the deputy chiefs, I think they should be held accountable for the actions of the people that's up under them. Because my dealing in law enforcement is if you hold the head accountable and you cut the head off, the body will follow. Okay. And I go back into the thing I said about Malcolm. I go back to what I said about Nat Turner. I go back all the way down the line. Uh, we have activists that are actually being lied to. In truth, you brought this up about the community. When a police officer kills somebody, we got 100,000 people marching down the street. Okay.
Absolutely.
When a white kid get killed, as you just said, nobody really cares. Okay. Because they've been documented to law and order. Okay.
Absolutely.
But when you look at this coming back down, if you're not going to march when a person kills my kid, a sexual offender, okay, what good is it to tear down a house? What good is it to tell the police department uh, they're not patrolling? Because I want to go back to this. Police officers were developed because there's a lot of bad people in the world. And in the world, there's a lot of bad people that came into town and took over the whole town and did what they had to do. And they had to get that one guy who was willing to fight the devil on the devil's footsteps. Okay? So you have to understand bad people, you have to get bad people to fight bad people. That's just the way the world is. Okay? You have to get somebody that kills, who don't mind killing, and who can sleep after they kill somebody. Okay, and it seems that we have taken that into our community, and we're taking that as a letter to allow things to happen because classic, we talked earlier about East Cleveland, true, and you didn't give me the answer on that, but do you think we can bring that city back?
Well, East Cleveland is gone. I'm sorry. You're not going to bring that city back. It's a city of approximately 16 to 17,000 people. The infrastructure is totally destroyed. The city, I think, brings in an income of maybe 10 million a year, but they need somewhere around 13 to 14 million a year to run the budget. You have the people sitting at City Hall who I actually want to bid with Cleveland about keeping them on if they take control of it. Well, nobody wants to take control of it. The
Right.
state offered $10 million to anybody who wanted to take it. No takers. You know, the city is gone. It should be absorbed, and the state should give enough funding for whoever absorbs their portion of the city. Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, maybe some part of South Euclid may run into that. But if these are absorbed, then the state should give the funding to help bring those segments of the city back, because it's not going to come from Cleveland, Cleveland Heights,
Well,
or
Cleveland
South
can't do it.
Euclid.
Cleveland can't. No city could absorb the problems that East Cleveland have. Right, the infrastructure alone is gone. But what I would say is to save the city is that if East Cleveland would come and give the West End to the University Circle Corporation and allow the investors to come in and spend money in that section and let somebody else manage the money instead of them, because they'll reap the benefits on the taxes and for the schools and having the people in their city with the $300,000 and $400,000 homes. But the problem is investors is not going to get on the bus with East Cleveland with the people in City Hall. So you have to cut City Hall out of the reinvestment part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the state had to foreclose on the city and just snatch it up and say,
Well,
okay,
but see, under the state charter, they can't do that. See, this is the problem. This is the problem that we're in right now.
they need to do it.
I understand they need to, but what everybody has to understand, under our state charter in the state of Ohio, the state can't absorb a city. So, and Cleveland cannot annex it because you have to have everybody in the city to want it, and Cleveland has enough problems. So, uh, for Cleveland to annex it and take over the problems, that's not going to happen because the West Side is not going to allow it. So when you look at Cleveland Heights and the suburbs are not going to do it because they don't want the problem, and then they can't. They have their own problems. Look at Euclid, okay? They can't.
It would change the voting dynamics.
Right. Well, you have to.
And they had
Everything
to
could change.
redistrict, yeah. Right.
Everything could change. Okay. But firstly, the income isn't there. Okay. But if you go to University Circle, which is not a city but it's a corporation with millions and millions of dollars of investors, and they building up on top of themselves right there with the hospitals. Okay, they can come in and absorb that West End from 125th all the way up to Euclid, and maybe even into the center of East Cleveland where Page and all them is at, and build up there and put $300,000 and $400,000 homes and condos and all that stuff there, and save the regentrification of the people. Okay, because you have to look at this. What they're doing now is they're just letting it go down. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and people are leaving, so it'd be a barren land, and that's what Cleveland Clinic did with Fannie Lewis. If you go back to when Fannie Lewis died and Lonnie Burton died, there was nobody taking that fight up. The land became barren, and Cleveland just walked in and took the land.
For cheap.
Okay.
Yep.
But we was talking about that. That was Chris Sanders on the phone. We got the Truth in Studio 51 with us. Truth, I really appreciate you joining us tonight and
Indeed.
going
Pleasure to be
live with
here.
us. Okay. We got Economic Mob here from Oklahoma with us. We appreciate that. Podcast Nation, we want to thank you for joining us tonight. And you can rehear this show as on Stop the Madness, Keep It 100. It will be the first hour, the next show coming up in next month. Hey, and I want everybody right here, I wish you all a wonderful New Year's and be prosper. But Truth, since you the guest in the studio, before we kick off of and go on to our second hour, what you want our people to know why you here with us.
Well, I'm here because I don't think the truth gets told enough. Sometimes we as black people don't want to accept the responsibility of the position that we're in. Now, we didn't get in by ourselves. We know that. We know there was a lot of forces working against us. But I don't see anyone in my yard throwing down trash. I don't see anyone in my neighborhood standing on the corners but us. You know, if we want to save ourselves, then we have to come together as a community. And the professor is not here to defend himself. We got to let the crabs go. We can't take those brothers that's going to hold us down into the future because they don't have one.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Truth. We're going to have Truth back on the air with us because he here in the land. Economic Mob, before we leave, go ahead and grab that mic, brother.
Hey, peace out, live long and prosper, and realize that like wealth actually goes past just financial dollars. Crime is actually like wealth as well. You get incarcerated, tickets, get arrested, court costs. That's wealth. So if we want to save, then us monitoring our behavior and looking out for our kids and actually recycling abundance of wealth back into the community effortlessly.
Hey, right there, we talk about some heavy issues
Yeah.
right here on Stop the Madness, Keep It 100. Hey, before we come back for a free for all, we're going to go take a commercial and we'll be right back.